Welcome to yet another episode of the Sable Reunion on Rugby Wire, and today we have one of the pioneers and architects of the beautiful running game as we've come to know it today. We have a gentleman who's been to two Rugby World Cup finals in the 15s, the 1991 and 1987 World Cups. And today I'd like to introduce Andy Ferreira. Andy, welcome to the Rugby Wire.
Thanks, Tabo. It's good to be here.
Andy, I'd like to find out from you what you're like as a young fella.
Tabo, quite interesting. I was born in Rusape, in Makoni now, and my parents farmed in an area called Inyati Block. And they were there for 2 years, for my first 2 years of my life, and then we went to Karoi, and there was virgin farms that were on offer to farm, and my parents moved to that area. So for the next 17 years, I grew up in Karoi. On the farm, it was interesting, a good life. I went to Karoi junior school, and then from there, my parents sent me to Churchill in Harare. And the reasoning behind that was they thought that I was fairly competitive, quite determined, and they thought that being at a big school like Churchill, it would offer me a lot more options in sport. And I enjoyed all sport, not just rugby. Rugby came later in my life.
So what were some of the sports you were involved in at Churchill?
Tabo played everything. I played basketball, cricket, tennis was one of my passions, and of course rugby. We did play rugby at Churchill, but through the years, rugby and tennis became my two favorite sports.
You have a very interesting background in tennis, especially, and I heard that at some point you were fairly big in the Zim tennis coaching circles.
Yeah, Tabo. When I left school, I went over to try and play some tennis professionally, and I played in a few tournaments in the UK, and just found out very quickly that I should have been a lot better than I was. So I struggled a little, and then I met a very interesting guy called John Crook, who was a Wimbledon doubles finalist, and he offered me a job as a coach and promised me that if I stayed with him, that he would turn me professional in 2 years, which is exactly what happened. So I went through all the coaching exams in the UK, turned professional there, and then I came back home. And I went back to Karoi, and we built 2 tennis courts at the riding school, got everyone excited about playing some tennis, and that's when I started playing rugby for Karoi, and I loved it equally. It was only when I moved into Harare, because of the pressure for tennis, I then became the director of tennis coaching in Zimbabwe. And I had a very big tennis school. It was at that point that I left, obviously, Karoi rugby team, and I played for Old Georgians Sports Club.
Old Georgians, yeah. And you've also represented Old Georgians in terms of your club rugby, etc.
OGs, we like to call it. A lot of my mates that I've played with won't like it, but the home of rugby. We loved it at Old Georgians, and I think I played from 1985 to 1993 for OGs. So, yeah.
Who are some of the people that you played with at OGs?
Well, the guys that you may recall is way back as Alan Mansfield. He was a Springbok trialist, very, very, very clever player. Steve Oborn, inside centre. And then, of course, later on, Richie Simba. Richie and I were blessed enough to play for OGs together for a season or two. Before at the World Cup, we both went to the World Cup as well.
And at this point, what position were you playing?
Interesting, I was a scrum half, but when I got to Old Georgians, they informed me that they had a lot of scrum halves, which they did, very competent scrum halves. So I played, I think my very first game was wing for the second team. I played one game there, then I was drafted into the first team at centre. Played centre for a few games, and then I was picked for Mashonaland at centre. And I'll never forget that, because I played with Alan Mansfield and Steve Oborn against Italy, who were touring. And we played them at the police grounds, and Mashonaland, we liked to get those touring sides first, because obviously acclimatizing, and so we got into them as hard as we could, and actually in that particular game, Mashonaland beat Italy.
Nice. And what was your experience of that particular match?
Obviously very, very nervous. I hadn't played anyone like Italy, that sort of grandeur of that nature, but it was excellent, and it was a good experience. Playing out of position was a little uncomfortable, but we had to get through it to progress.
Yeah, so somewhere along the line, you migrated from a tennis semi-pro, to the second team of OGs, and weirdly.
Yeah. It seems a strange combination, doesn't it?
Yeah,
tennis and rugby, but
very unlikely, very unconventional.
Yeah. But I was very fortunate because then I was picked to go on the Spain-Portugal. We went via Kenya to Spain and Portugal.
So it was 1985.
Yeah, we played some. Lou Corby at that point was the coach, and we played a couple of games. Played quite a few games over there, and then came back, and that's when I was picked as the national scrum half, which was where I really wanted to be.
How old are you at this point?
Too old, eh? My first game for Zimbabwe was when I was 25.
25.
So 25, 26.
So that was 1985 again?
Yeah.
So yeah, how many
86.
first team games that you had playing club rugby at this point?
Oh, Jesus. Probably 100. I don't know. Loads, because we had touring sides those days. It was quite nice. So quite a few. I don't know exactly, to be honest.
So tell us, back then, touring was very interesting. You'd go away for months on end. How long was the Spain?
No, not really.
Portugal
We didn't really. I don't think finances afforded that. I think we went for a couple of weeks.
A couple of weeks.
Yeah, a couple of weeks, maybe closing on 3 maximum. But that was probably the longest we ever went on tour. Yeah.
And how did your official call-up come through? What did they do in those days? Did they call you?
Interesting. Well, you do get a letter. We did. I was non-traveling reserve in 1985 with a couple of other club mates, and then obviously through injury or non-availability, we got the call up to play, and it was quite nice because once we played on tour, I think the selectors could see that we had something to offer the country. So that's when we got selected.
Many of our viewers now wouldn't be familiar with the way our first World Cup participation came about. They more or less used to qualification. When did you first hear about a World Cup, and what were your first thoughts about the World Cup?
Look, obviously excitement, because we didn't know whether we would actually go or not. I think there was a little bit of doubt, but we did get offered a place as the 16th team to participate in the World Cup. So obviously massive excitement. Did we prepare well enough? I know that question. I know you asked me informally about that, and the answer probably is not really. We were fit, very fit, and our focus was on fitness, etc. But I think we lacked knowledge all round at that point of our rugby history. And I'm talking about tactics and maybe studying another team and how best we could play them and what sort of patterns we should use. They were almost non-existent. We played a running style of rugby, which we Zimbabweans know. We love to run with the ball. And I think largely we were expected to just use our natural ability. There was no set pieces of that where we could do something off the ball and create more space. And I don't think we were at that level at all. And obviously not enough experience. We had very little experience going into that first World Cup.
At this point, are you looking at it from the perspective of a coach, or were you aware of this as a player, that you guys were not as prepared as you could have been?
I don't think so. If I really think back, there was more excitement and trying to be as fit as I could be, and just to make sure I tried to put on a green and white jersey. So at that point in my life, I wasn't thinking too much about coaching, because we had Brian Murphy, who was the coach. And again, I just say that we had very basic moves, which brings a smile to my face now. But look, again, I think they relied on natural ability, and we love to run the ball. Zimbabweans have always loved to run the ball, and that's what we did.
So leading up to the World Cup itself, other than the Spain, Kenya, Portugal series, were there other?
I think there could have been a long time ago, maybe an incoming tour of some sort. But again, I say we just didn't have enough game time at that level. You talk about schoolboy level, then you club level to provincial level to national level are all big steps. And obviously going from that to a World Cup or world stage is another big level up. And I don't think we had enough experience to absorb or cope with that as well as maybe we could have. We went there with one objective, and that was to beat Romania. And we came very, very close. It was heartbreaking that we lost in the last couple of minutes of the match, because that would have been a real victory for us.
I'd like to take you back to that Romania match. You know, there were a couple of weird situations that happened. You'd gone there primarily as a scrum half, but you wound up playing as fullback.
Yeah,
How did that happen?
Yeah, that happened. We had an injury. Our fullback, just a week before, not even, it was ruled out of playing fullback. So the powers that be, the coaches, thought that would be the best thing, is to put me in at the fullback. So the very first game that I played fullback was at the World Cup at Eden Park. We played Romania first at Eden Park, then we travelled to windy Wellington to play Scotland, and then came back to Eden Park to play our final match against France.
Yep, and weirdly enough, our first try at the World Cup began with a move when they kicked back at you and you returned.
Yeah, that's right.
Came back with interest. Do you remember that?
I do remember that, and I think was it Richie Simba that ended up scoring that try.
Yes, it was.
I think it was Richie Simba. Yeah, he actually did very well. He scored 2 tries in that match.
Yes, he did.
Before he hurt his shoulder. So that was good. That was really good.
Yeah. Do you remember how that whole series happened? Romania had kicked back early in the match. I think they were trying to put territorial pressure.
Yeah, and then I think I fielded the ball. I passed to Peter Koolback, who was playing on the right wing.
On David.
It was quite a long pass to him, and then I think he took it up and he chipped and collected his own chip and then dummied inside, and then found Richie Simba on the outside. So I think I remember that clearly.
Yeah, that was beautiful.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, it didn't end the way that we wanted it to.
It was very disappointing. If I look at, shall we carry on rolling?
Yeah, just carry on.
Carry on. Yeah, I think if we looked at it, 91, same thing. We had to qualify for the World Cup, and shall we start again on that one? I've also lost my train of thought now.
Unfortunately, that match didn't end as we would have liked it to have done.
No, but you know, maybe I should just give you a little insight to what I experienced in New Zealand. One thing that struck me immediately was the culture in New Zealand of rugby. You know, I'll give you a few examples. We went into a pizzeria, and this old woman was in that pizzeria, and she recognized us as the Zimbabwe World Cup team, and said to us, guys, you're playing Scotland next. You need to have quick ball. You need to hit those rucks quickly, quick ball, and let the ball go. Those Scottish forwards are very big. You don't want to end up mauling with them. So that was from an old dear. She must have been in her 80s, to giving us good, and it was the right advice. And when we went to go and train on one of the fields, there was a clubhouse with wooden floors, and the kids were there kicking a ball around and rucking and like taking each other out over the ball. And you know, it was just such a revelation just to see how they lived and breathed rugby. You know,
and these were kids from all backgrounds.
All backgrounds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How much of a difference was there from what you were used to and what you come from?
Yeah, but I mean, just to feel it. You could feel the culture there. You could feel the pride in the whole nation. You know, so it was a vibe that we obviously didn't have really. I don't think not enough of. But you know, well, obviously our objective. It was so nice playing at the Peace Grounds, because you saw the kids line up by the tunnel, and it meant something to them. And that's important that continues, so that our young kids have someone to look up to as role models. And that's what's really, really and so good that our team now have qualified for this up and coming World Cup. It's absolutely tremendous.
Were there any notable players, especially from that very first World Cup that you played, that you came up against? Like?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, you got Philippe Sella, and you've got Serge Blanco, and you've got some very, very good players. And the Scottish team, same thing. You're rubbing shoulders with some of the top players in the world at that point. And you know, to play Scotland and France, who were the eventual runners-up in the first World Cup, was massive for us. You know, and in those days, I think the rule was if you had 3 injuries, or you could replace 2, and then after that, you had to play short. And unfortunately for us, Mark Neal was taken out at the back of a line-out, I think quite early in the second half, if I'm not mistaken. And we played France, who were the eventual runners-up of that World Cup with 14 men. So that wasn't pleasant. But we learned a lot from them because they played a lot of niggly stuff off the ball.
Very underhanded, yeah.
Absolutely. So, that's where the maturity comes in and the experience comes in. You've got to learn those things and go and experience them so you can mentally handle them. You don't get upset or emotional about it. It's part of the game. And that's, mental toughness is a massive part of the game. So more and more exposure, like the boys are getting now. I think this preparation is marvelous for them. Playing Canada, playing America, playing big games, Tonga. I think it's absolutely amazing. And I really am excited for them because they now are rubbing shoulders with top players and getting that feel that it is possible.
Yeah.
You can make it happen.
That 1987 World Cup, we were invited as the 16th team.
Yeah.
And we participated as the 16th team. But not everyone was happy about that. There was a fair amount of controversy.
No, there was. Russia were not happy with that. I remember them coming before the World Cup and we played 2 test matches, one in Harare, which we lost, and then one in Bulawayo, which we won. They were still obviously very unhappy that we went and they felt that they should have gone. So on our return from the World Cup, Russia were waiting here for, I would call it a grudge match. And it was exactly that because it was very, very physical. And luckily, fortunately, we won that game 18-9.
18-9, yeah. In those days, a try was 4 points.
Yeah.
Everything else was still the same.
Yeah, I think 3 and 2, yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
So that must have been a tight match.
It was a tight match. And it's one we just had to win. We really had to roll up the sleeves and get busy. Yeah.
So in between 1987 and 1991, there was a bit of a shift in the way the IRB at that time did their things. That's when they brought in the qualifiers.
The qualifiers, yes.
Could you walk us through the qualifiers?
Yeah, that was an exciting time. We had a new coach, a guy called Duncan Rossiter. He was a New Zealander from Palmerston North, and he came in, and I must say it was quite refreshing in a way. We had to play, luckily at home, we had the qualifiers. We played Ivory Coast, Morocco and Tunisia in that order. And I felt that, honestly, when they got here, they were out to beat us. They wanted to go badly and at the expense of us, Zimbabweans. But again, we were all hosted at Prince Edward School and we played all the matches at police grounds. I think you might remember some of them.
Yep.
Very hostile, sometimes a bit unpleasant. But again, Zimbabwe, we came through it and we won all 3 games and qualified for the World Cup.
There is a match that stands in many people's memory, the final qualifier against Tunisia. Don't be humble.
No,
Talk us through that one.
It was an amazing match. We did very well. We won quite comfortably at the end, I think.
A lot of our viewers are relatively young. Please set the scene. Tunisia was the last match we had.
It was the last match, Look, I had a very fortunate game. I scored a couple of tries and I kicked. I didn't miss a kick that day, which was really nice. Just to win, and when that final whistle went, just to know that we were going to the World Cup again, it was just amazing.
Yeah, man of the match performance, and he was carried on the shoulders of people, and at that time that meant a lot.
It certainly did, and it just showed you how passionate, which I wasn't aware of, to be honest, Tabu. I didn't understand how passionate some of our youngsters were. And that day, with that exact feeling of being lifted up by those guys and carried around the police grounds was amazing. And I just knew then how much they actually cared and were so proud of us that we'd achieved that. I must say it was quite emotional.
At that point, you must have reflected on your journey because you weren't exactly in the A sides at Churchill.
No, exactly. So,
a couple of years later, you're being carried on the shoulders of.
Well, it's amazing how life. I think the big thing, Tobo, and the message to all kids is, if you want something bad enough, you have to make it happen. It ain't gonna just land in your lap. So it was a dream of mine always when I was at boarding school, going to the police grounds to watch the big matches, to imagine what it was like to put on a green and white jersey, just to imagine it. And I think that sort of stayed with me. And once I'd come back from tennis overseas, then I really started thinking that I may have an outside chance when I got picked for Mashonaland, and then I wanted it, and I was really hungry, and that's the message: is that don't stop trying. If you want something bad enough, you go for it.
And family? What was the situation at that time? Were you married at this point?
Yeah, I got married in 1989, so between the World Cups. And then I think you asked me earlier, what happened after 1991. I did play 1 or 2 games, and then I did say that I wasn't available for national duty, but I would play for Mashonaland 1 or 2 games and definitely play another year for my club. It seemed the right thing to do, Tabu. I just started a new business. My son was on his way, and I sort of had other commitments and priorities, I guess. So I think for me, it was the right time to step back, and then obviously then wanted to put something back into rugby, which I think is important that players do in whatever form they can. My passion then was to start coaching and helping the schoolboys. So I did that with St. John's College, the under 14 side to begin with, and then a couple of years later I actually worked for St. John's as the senior master, the discipline master there. You may laugh, but yeah. And then I coached, I think, the first team with Ryan Vickery for 4 or 5 years, I think. I really enjoyed those years. They were good. And from there, I went to Peterhouse with a very good friend of mine, and who's also played national rugby and captained the country, Dave Kirkman. And I coached with him. He was the head coach at Peterhouse. We did 10 years together there.
10 years.
Yeah. And then the last 2 years, I went down to help the juniors at Falcon.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah.
All right, so we'll take a short break at this point. Welcome back to the Sable reunion on Rugby Wire. We're with Andy Ferreira. Andy, we're now moving on to 1991, the World Cup that happened in England, Ireland.
Yes. Scotland,
again.
yeah, we played in Edinburgh, yeah.
Yeah, and Wales.
And yes, and also we played in Belfast, our last game. Yeah, that was exciting because we'd qualified for that World Cup. And again, I think we looked at Japan. You've got to be realistic. We're drawn up against really, really good sides. But we picked one, and that was Japan. And that's the game that we felt, or I think the coaches felt, that we could target and hope and maybe get over the line. Sadly, that didn't happen.
Why did you feel you could beat Japan?
Well, they came out prior to the World Cup, and I think we had a good result with them at the police grounds. So, you've got to look at who you think you might be able to take down, and like later on in life I did with the Sevens, we always used to target one side, and the Japan was the side that we thought that we could have a crack at.
And in that case, 1991, your group had Japan. Who else?
We had Scotland again, and we had France again, if I'm not mistaken. Let me check on that.
That was Ireland.
It was Ireland, Scotland, and Japan. That was those 3.
Yep.
Yeah, it was those 3. It was Ireland, Scotland, and Japan. We played Ireland first at Lansdowne Road, and then we played Scotland next in Edinburgh. It's when Adrian Garvey scored those 2 magnificent tries. And then we played Japan in our last game in Belfast.
Adrian Garvey went on to play for the
Springboks. Correct. Yeah.
So you had a number of really young, exciting talents again. Could you walk us through some of them? You've already mentioned.
Well, Garves was good, and obviously, Richie Simba, amazing player. I think Simba's, a lot of heart, and we, I don't know, I can't say it on TV, but a lot of spirit. I think Garbs definitely stood out. He was fantastic at that World Cup, and the speed, and so we were very proud of him then. Yeah.
Any other standout players?
I think we had just a team that good all round sportsmen. Yeah.
Yeah. And unfortunately, Japan didn't go your way.
Not at all.
What happened in that match?
Ron, you know, it really makes me sad to think about it, because I don't think there's a lot of things we didn't do right. I don't think. Personally, I don't think we were prepared well enough for that World Cup, and I think there were some very interesting selections, which I maybe don't wholly agree with, but it happened, and you got to, there's horses for courses. That's what the coaches say, and I believe that too. You know, you need to tell players why they're not playing, or give them a good reason why they might not be, so that they still have faith in the coach. But we had some interesting selections, and like I say again, I don't think the preparation was as good as it could have been and should have been.
The New Zealander that you've spoken about had been moved on, shall we say?
Yeah, yeah. We should have been better than we were then, I believe.
Yeah, and on reflection, I should say, have we progressed from where we were back then? Because we've gone to 2 World Cups already, and the preparations were not up to snuff.
Look, I think everyone gave it their best shot. Okay, I just think the situation we found ourselves in was difficult. The players had to all hold down jobs, so there was no time to spend hours and hours every day in the gym or practicing your skill sets or whatever. So I think everyone did try their best. I do believe that after the 91 World Cup, we had a little bit of a slump. You know, we didn't qualify. You know, again, I don't think our preparations were as good as they should have been. But I do believe that Coach Bernardi and his team have done an amazing job. This time around, it feels different, and I can see it's different. There's a much more professional approach. The boys are getting some good game time with some good opposition. So it's quite exciting now. For me, Tabo, I'm much more excited now, because I think we've beaten Namibia twice. We've qualified for the World Cup, legitimately qualified. And I think now we need to just go forward. And it's huge congrats to Pete Bernardi and his team. And the boys, obviously the men. They've done an amazing job. They've just got to remain focused, humble, and just, you know, we can do it. We can do something.
100%. And of course, this is a couple of days after the boys played their final Nations Cup match against Canada. Yeah. So,
and they came close. So no, I think it's all good building blocks for the actual World Cup. They just remained focused, remained, you know, determined to do well. I think we can do that.
In 1995, in fact 1994, we failed to qualify for the 95 World Cup, and tellingly, we missed out on that wave of professional rugby, and in many ways, we haven't caught up. Do you feel perhaps if we get something right in this World Cup, we could become a more professional union, perhaps?
Tobo, there's always been politics, unfortunately, and it really makes me sick to the stomach that there's so much politics in our wonderful sport. And there's always been politics and always been problems. What I did try and do once I'd retired from national 15s is to concentrate on the 7-a-side game. And I truly believed that, you know, we have the talent. When you look at the 3 quarters and the pace that we have and the skills and the flank forwards we have, we can compete with any side in the world. Okay, and that is what I took to the union. And I said to them, we've been invited to qualify for the Sevens World Cup. And very unfortunately, the union had no appetite to support us. They said that we needed to raise our own money, form our own admin, etc., which we did do that. And we were told to stay away from the national players. We were currently playing for the national side. So I looked at the second teams of the clubs, OH, Old Georgians, Rory Sports Club, OMs, Busters. We had a look to see what we had in the pool. And we picked a squad and we trained for nearly a year. And then we did go to the World Cup qualifiers in Dubai, and we did qualify. And that was a huge step for us, because then at least we were on the world stage again. And I must tell you that the improvement in our skill sets, when we came back from that and having trained for a year, a lot of those men who played for us walked into the national side. The skill level was at a higher level. And that's purely from just practicing and practicing and practicing, getting your skill sets up.
This was, of course, the period between 96 and 99.
Yeah, so we started then. And then we went to the first World Cup in 97. And the second World Cup, the first World Cup that we attended was in Hong Kong. England were the current world champions. We played in the pool with them, the world champions, England and Canada. And in the first game of that evening at Hong Kong, we beat Canada, which was a real boost for us. And the boys could suddenly believe that it can be done. And from there, a lot of those boys got contracts to play in various clubs or provinces worldwide, which suited us because we have nothing to really hold them in Zimbabwe. It gave them an opportunity to be involved with good coaching and good structures overseas, with the proviso that when we were playing on the circuit, that at their cost they had to bring the player back to wherever we were playing, whether it was Tokyo or Dubai or Singapore. And that's how we managed for the next 6 years.
And these were very young and unestablished players, guys like Isaac Mbereko.
Well, Isaac Mbereko, Kenny Simba rings a bell, Drugs Maziwa, Steve Matandwa.
Yeah.
A lot of talent,
from the second teams and
from the second teams, and then they're a nice blend with people like John Ewing and Ryan Becker, Cole Mazamba, you'll remember.
Yes.
And I just want to tell you how much talent we do have. I don't know if people are aware that when Fiji were the world champions, they picked a World Sevens team, and two of our boys made this World Sevens team
from that group.
Cole Mazamba played on the wing, and a guy called Leon Greef. He played loose head prop for us in the sevens. He had the speed and presence, but those guys played, and it was just such a feather in our caps that two of our boys actually played for the World Sevens team.
And at this point, you were working as senior master at St. John's?
Yeah, I was senior master at St. John's, and trying to coaching there and coaching the sevens. And St. John's was very good to me. They did, when the national duty called, they gave me time off to go and do that. So I was grateful for that.
So to what extent did your role as senior master in charge of discipline prepare you and empower you to handle the young men that you had at that point?
Well, I think quite well, because to be honest, if you ask any of the sevens players, I always believe there's a time to play and a time to work. And we were very, very strict with the boys. Pre-tournaments, a lot of hard training, very hard training and discipline. If the kids showed that, not kids, the men, if they showed that they weren't committed, then they simply just didn't go. And trying to set an example for future teams that there's no room for that. So it played a big part. I think our discipline was really good on and off the field. I think we were good ambassadors around the world. Obviously, downtime when you won, and we won in Dubai. We've beaten a lot of the top sides in the world. And like I say, every tournament we would pick one and say, okay, that we're going to go for that team in our first pool matches. We've beaten France, we've beaten England, Australia, Argentina. And the one fact that I don't know if a lot of Zimbabweans know is that we beat the Springboks in Dubai. And it just showed you that, everyone's human. So, whilst you show respect to your opposition, you're not overawed by them. They have the same blood running through their veins, and it's just a mental toughness to believe in yourself. And on that night, those nights we did. And once that happened, we were quite a dangerous outfit.
And of course, when we're talking about these sides, England were defending world champions, and you came close to beating them.
Yes, on the first night, like I said, we beat Canada on the first game, and there was only 2 games that night, and then we played the world champions, and we lost in the last 5 minutes by a try. Which was so heartening that we felt that we were up there and we could compete. So it gave the boys a huge lift. Yeah.
And the Springbok side that you beat.
Yeah, again,
like
I said to the boys in the change room, that you get, not many people in Zimbabwe in particular will ever get an opportunity to take the field against a Springbok or a Springbok team, and that night we did. So, I said, make most of every single second. Don't give an inch. Trust, if you're going to run at someone, make sure you go definitely past them. If someone runs at you, put him down. And the men were up for it. And that night they played their hearts out.
And the renowned boxer in that team.
I think Bobby Skinner was on the plane with us. I know Pretorius, he played a few games at the fly half for the Springboks. He played. So yes, there were some notable Springboks in that side. And, if you run onto a field and they're wearing a Springbok jersey, that's good enough.
Yeah. 100%. And in terms of your coaching of tennis at this point, had it taken a step back?
It had taken a step back, Tabo. When I was a director of tennis coaching, I was fortunate enough to be on a tour to Australia. The Rothman Sports Foundation sponsored some of the top coaches in their disciplines. I know Lou Corby went for the rugby. I went for tennis. Brian Fraser went for hockey. Dave Houghton for cricket. And we were sponsored by Rothman Sports Foundation to go and see how they handled in their disciplines from grassroots to professional level. And when I got back from Australia, I learned a valuable lesson there. We had to develop grassroots, and we managed to raise enough money to build tennis courts in the high density areas, but in a position where we could hot seat and maybe 3 or 4 schools could actually use that. So I was coaching a lot of the coaches at that point, tennis coaches, and I put a coach into each of those. I think we had 5 tennis courts in the different areas, the high densities in Harare. And I do know that in the first 2 or 3 years, we had 90,000 kids that went through that system of playing a little bit of tennis or knowing what it was about or hitting against the wall. And some really good players have come through that system. So it just shows you that we have raw ability and raw talent in Zimbabwe. We just got to identify and find them, and give them the opportunity more than anything.
And this was leading up to that Davis Cup wave.
That's right. That's right. And it just shows you what practice does. Some of those kids got out there all day hitting balls. I think our famous tennis players from Zim, the Blacks, Byron and Wayne. And of course, how well has she done? And those guys, they used to come back from school and hit just thousands and thousands and thousands of balls. And that's the message. If you want it badly enough, that's what you got to do. You got to put the time in.
100%. And of course, many of those have gone on to become professional coaches in their own right. Able to look after their families, able to to pour into the next generation of tennis players.
That's right.
And,
So a lot of coaching now, there's a lot of synergies, tennis coaching or rugby coaching. Okay, tennis can be a bit more of an individual sport, whereas rugby is a group sport. But, it's important that you make a relationship, you develop a relationship with whoever you're coaching, because that is important, that the people you're coaching, they learn to trust you, you trust them, you have a rapport with them, you've got to hurt, when they're hurting, you hurt. When they're happy, you happy, and they've got to feel it. And once you develop a relationship like that, you get so much more out of the kids than the boss, But that's what I believe anyway. So you've got to get a rapport with them.
So for you to become the mentor of coaches, as it were, and the leader of young men, as it was, who can we say poured into your cup? Who did you take from? Who?
Well, I think I've got to.
Who inspired you?
Well, I've got to look at my own parents to begin with. My mother was a very good hockey player and softball player, and likewise my father was a very outstanding baseball player. So they had sport running through their veins, the competitive, I would imagine the discipline, and I've got to give them credit that they put me on the right road, I guess. And then obviously schooling was important. I think my folks made a good decision. Churchill was a very big school, a lot of competition. Discipline was pretty harsh. Being a boarder at Churchill was tough, especially when you're a junior. But it did us a lot of good. It didn't do any harm. And then, that just carried through, I think, in my whole life.
You've spoken about discipline quite a bit in your formative years at Churchill. You rose to become the head of Winston. Could you walk us through some of the leadership lessons that you learned from leading your peers? And
that's an interesting question. I think it's just the will. It's the will to do better. It's the will to set an example. So yes, discipline was huge, and obviously being made head boy of Winston, it comes with responsibility and leadership, and you need to step up and show the way. And I think that's helped carry me through a lot of things. Captaining the national side was the same thing. It was an absolute honour, and it is. It can be lonely sometimes because you don't necessarily want to be everyone's best friends. But at the same time, you care very much about your peers on the field. But you've got to also be strong. And sometimes you are involved in the decision making, and sometimes it's tough because there's people that you really like, but that doesn't mean that you choose them or you vote for them because they're your best mate. You've got to, I believe, always pick your best players, your absolute best players, and that's what we did with the Sevens. There was no politics. We had because we were, I suppose, divorced from the union in some way. We had to obviously get blessing from them to travel, etc. But it gave us the freedom to actually pick the very best players that were available to us without any interference, which was nice. It was a good feeling.
In terms of the leadership that you took from sport, whether it was tennis, school, rugby, how did that equip you as a father and as a husband?
Well, I've been very lucky that my family have supported me because obviously a lot of touring and a lot of training and away from home on taking kids to schoolboy tours, etc. But they've been absolutely supportive, and you want to make them proud. For me, I'd like my family to be proud of my achievements, but at the same time try and remain humble.
Now, definitely that has come through in so many things that you've done. You've been a servant of the sport, you've been a servant of the country, you've done a lot, you've given a lot. Has it cost you anything in terms of? Tabo,
I don't regret anything. I am very happy that I've put time back into rugby, and I really have. I think from the day that I stopped playing rugby, I've coached in some form, whether it's the club or whether it's sevens or whether it's schoolboy. And it just gives me so much satisfaction to see schoolboys getting better, achieving something as a group, as individuals. And that really does make me very proud. And I do love it, I must say.
So if I was to sit your son down now and ask him who he knows you to be, what are the things that are likely to come up?
I'm not sure, Tabu. I think he'd say that I'm fairly determined. Probably try to get my way if I I mostly do. I think he'd say that, but hopefully he would say that he's proud of me. That would mean a lot to me.
Yeah. Oh, that's beautiful. And then I want you to imagine the World Cup in Australia 2027. You're sitting at the back of the stadium, you're watching the boys go onto the field, and you're listening to the anthem going on. What will be running through your mind?
I'd be absolutely willing the boys to do well and to just try and remain calm, not to get over emotional about things. Sometimes you can over hype up, and you can make the silly mistakes earlier on in the game. So, but I'm sure Coach Bernardi's on top of that big time. I'd just be willing them to have a good start, and once you get a good start, just to keep your tails up and just to keep that determination and that pride. Most of all, the pride. Just don't give an inch. Just do not give an inch. Just refuse, and just to see what's on the other side of that wall. I say sometimes to the kids, have you ever pushed yourself that hard that you can see what's on the other side of that wall? And that's the message. Just is to guys. You've got more in you than you think. You really have. Everybody's got that, just that little bit more, that little X factor. So go out there. This is the time to express it. And just like Adrian Garvey did. Garvey went from, a very good prop. He could play eighth man. He's very fast. And he just made it happen at the World Cup, scoring those 2 tries. That would be the message, is to just don't lie down. And this is your chance. Collectively work for your team. Work for your supporters, work for your country, work for your family, And most of all, try and leave that jersey in a slightly better place than you found it or you received it. And if all of us could do that, just, obviously it won't always happen, but if you strive to do that, we can only be in a better place.
You definitely left that jersey in a better place than you found it, Andy.
Well,
thank you very much.
Thanks, Tabu. Thank you very much.